All right. We are thrilled to have one of our newer partners, Carr, with us. And today we have Ken Jorgensen with Carr as we roll out this conversation, an introduction, and share a deck with you regarding Carr, one of our partners here at Dentist Advisors. Carr is one of the nation's leading providers of commercial real estate services for healthcare and um, specializing, especially, I'm going to say, Ken, in working with dentists in dentistry. Um, Yesterday, as we were talking with Ken, I thought, what a point Ken just made in sharing that one of the main line items that we review, here at Dentist Advisors is overhead of a practice, and the decision that dentists make when um, purchasing their real estate, expanding their real estate, acquiring new real estate can be a game changer for a line item for the next 10, 20, 30 years. We have Carr as a partner in our corner to help our clients understand and make decisions in real estate with the assistance of Carr. So, Ken, um, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you and excited for Ken to share this deck and we can ask questions throughout. Um, I will jump in here and there and everybody just know that Ken is available to talk to for advice at any time and utilize Carr and their services. So with that being said, Ken, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Awesome. No, thank you. And been looking forward to this conversation for a little while and hope it is that. I hope it is a good dialogue or conversation. So jump in anytime you think we should sit on something a little longer or explain something in a little bit more detail that would be helpful. Um, as you probably see on the first slide here, we're calling it maximizing your profitability through real estate, and we kind of talked about it yesterday a little bit in terms of why is the topic of real estate or commercial real estate important to a dentist. I remember when I first got started about 10 years ago, I'd go to dental association meetings or study clubs, and I'd have a little banner up that says Carr and lease negotiation, purchase, all the different relocations, expansions, all that. And people would walk by and they'd be like, okay, the supply guy makes sense to me, and maybe the financial advisor that, where that makes sense to me, but why is there a real estate agent here? Like, what is going? I need my bank. I need my lender here or whatever. But why is there a real estate guy at this dental meeting? And so one of the things that I usually like to do is kind of start with a little background on Carr, how we got here, what kind of brought us to this point, and where we're at and what we're doing, and then we can kind of jump into what's most important for a dentist to be looking at in their real estate and making considerations, making decisions. How can you maximize your profitability? Because like we said yesterday, many times the real estate is worth just as much, if not even more, than the practice once
Yeah.
it is time to sell that practice. And so, this decision, lease or purchase, or one site versus multiple sites, or how do I negotiate these concessions? What is negotiable? All of these considerations are super important when it comes to your bottom line and the profitability there. So let's jump right in. As you mentioned, we're the nation's leading provider of healthcare real estate services for tenants and buyers. So kind of a mouthful, but what that means is we only represent dentists who are buying or leasing real estate. We don't have any listings. You'll never see our name on the side of a building or a shopping center or anything like that. We don't list property because we feel like there's a conflict of interest. If a real estate broker is representing landlords and tenants or buyers and sellers. So you would never have the opposing party's attorney represent you if you were to go into court. And in the same way, you can lose tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars if you have an agent who also represents landlords in that market. So we've kind of removed that. We've stepped back. We've said all we're going to do is be very niche and narrow in who we work with. And we represent thousands of dentists and healthcare providers every year with their lease and purchase negotiations. We've got, I think this is a little outdated. I think we have around 170 agents and staff around the country right now. We're licensed in all 50 states. So we're able to help clients across the country. We are not up in Canada yet, but there is talks about that. But coast to coast, we're able to help our clients, and we help save dentists a substantial amount of time and money. And we'll kind of walk through that, both of those elements. Obviously, the money makes sense because I can negotiate, hopefully get a better deal negotiated for me. But the time is also a big component there, because it takes dozens of hours to walk through the due diligence and the evaluation and tours and looking at properties and getting your team, getting your architect and designer and GC and all that into the team, equipment person. And so there's a lot of not only money that is on the table, but also your valuable time. In addition, if you work with an agent, whether it's Carr, obviously we'd love to work with you, but whether it's Carr or another healthcare buyer tenant rep firm, you're going to be able to avoid some of these pitfalls. We typically, a dentist is going to do 1 or 2 transactions every decade. Whereas we're going to do, 3 or 4 transactions, our average broker, 3 or 4 transactions this month. And so understanding what's important and what we should be looking at in a lease and what landlords are willing to do, or what's really vital to have in the lease of a dentist versus, a nail salon or an elementary school or a tire store. Like, it's very different. So you want to work with somebody who understands how to keep you away from stumbling and away from those hurdles or pitfalls. Obviously, you want to work with somebody who's ensuring that your interests are first and protected, and that we're trying to get you the most amount of concessions and at the least lowest lease rate possible, the best terms possible, and all of the negotiable points have been identified there. And then obviously also to make sure that you have a solid game plan for success in this next step, because this is likely going to be one of your biggest investments. If it's a purchase or you're signing a 5 or 10-year lease, and then you've got some renewal options after that. Like you said, Spencer, it could be a 20-year decision that you're making. And so you want to make sure you don't misstep on the front end.
Yeah. Ken, just pause. So like, if we took that as the introduction right there, everything that Ken has just shared, it's like, from our standpoint in our office, we would say, how would you go at this alone? How would, let's be honest. Being a dentist takes a lot of entrepreneurship and a lot of time, and trying to figure out the real estate without someone who is looking at it on the daily, like you mentioned, 3 to 4 deals per month, compared to your one that is going to last 30 years, is so important to have you as a resource and not just try your best solo.
Well, we always say we have a lot of people and partners, and they'll say, so who are your competitors? Who else is out there? And, there are different local agents that specialize in healthcare, or they might do more dental offices or medical offices than others in a specific market. Coast to coast, though, we honestly don't really have any big national competitors. We say our main competitor is the dentist out there driving around on the weekend, looking for lease signs and calling those on his or her own. And that couldn't be further away from the right approach to navigating your commercial real estate. Because when you call that number on the side of the building, that person's fiduciary, that listing agent's fiduciary, is to the landlord. And so everything you say can and will be used against you in that in that phone call, and it'll be used in that negotiation. And so our main competitor is just the dentist who doesn't know we exist.
I know.
And because again, our service is similar to residential, where the buyer and the tenant don't pay for their representation, and so it's a no cost step to get this protection, to save dozens of hours and avoid those pitfalls and get better concessions, because as we'll talk about in just a minute, there's a very strategic approach to driving up the concessions and getting and maximizing your profitability in that transaction.
Can we have this phrase in our office, that dentist driving around on Saturday afternoon looking would fall under the category of random acts of finance? Um, and and this would be one of them that would be like, hey, I've got a good idea. I'm gonna go. It's like that is a random act of finance that is going to hurt. So
100%. And typically they don't know how much it hurts until it's too late, unfortunately. There are many times we'll get calls from dentists and they'll say, hey, can you review this lease I just signed a month ago? And I'm like, we can, but there's nothing you can do about it now. And I'm like, how did you find this? Well, I live right behind the shopping center and I love this space. And so I signed, and I'm like, well, I'm looking at it and I'm like, who negotiated this for you? And he's like, well, I did. And I'm like, oh gosh, like this is not good. And there have been numerous scenarios where it's painful to call that dentist back and give them an honest assessment of where they're at. And I'm like, the very first chance you have to renew that lease and renegotiate, you need to get somebody, an attorney, a broker. I'm not just trying to sell Carr, but get somebody on your team who knows, what they're doing and what to watch out for.
yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of, we help our clients in a number of scenarios. I don't know why it's making that funny transition
that
there.
that looks good. It
Yeah, that
highlights.
was really that was really fun to watch. Um, but our advisors help with startups. We help a ton of startup dentists throughout the country every year. We help with lease renewals, which we kind of just talked about. This is a transaction that a lot of times dentists aren't thinking about. If I've been in my property for 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and I don't want to move, I know how costly it is to build out a dental space, but my lease renewal is coming up. It's really important to see that as a point of negotiation. Like, don't just the landlord is going to send over the lease renewal document, usually a one-page extension for 5 or 10 years. He's going to probably slide that across to you the month before your lease expires. And why are they doing that? Because you have no posture, you have no ability to negotiate. He knows that you don't have the right amount of time to relocate. You're not going to be in a position to be able to negotiate that lease and get better terms. And so we do thousands of lease renewals and help clients with that every year as well, where we step in and we say, hey, landlord, Dr. So-and-so has hired us to evaluate the market. One of the options is staying put, but they've also asked us to take a look at this one and that one. And we do that so that we can show apples to apples. Here's what these other properties are offering. Or maybe we run a purchase versus lease analysis. Here's what it looks like if you were to purchase versus sign another lease term. And so we step in and help. When you do that, when you have the right strategy, the landlord is in a position where they've got to sharpen their pencil. And you typically get terms that are better than what you had. I mean, because every lease typically has annual escalations. So after 10 or 15 years, you're way over market.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want to move. I don't want to go through that hassle. But at the same time, you're overpaying by $1,000, $1,500, $2,500 a month. And so if we can step in and say, hey, landlord, our dentist, our client may not be in the business of real estate. You and I are, and you and I both know you're way overcharging this client, which is why they've hired us. So if you want to retain this tenant for another 5 years or 7 years or 10 years or whatever, you're going to have to get a little bit more aggressive, because we've already negotiated 2 other spaces that are looking pretty good in comparison to what you're offering. So we do a ton of those lease renewals. We help clients with expansions, with relocations if they're wanting to look at additional offices, purchases. We do a lot of purchases, land deals, or buying a condo or a standalone building, and then practice transitions. We don't help clients that are buying a practice. We don't help on the acquisition of the practice, but there's always going to be a real estate component there. So a lease is going to be assigned, or a building or a condo is going to be purchased as well as a separate side transaction. And so we'll step in during a transition or an acquisition, and we'll help with the real estate. Um, Real estate is okay. I don't know. One of my kids must have jumped in here and played with the transition. I don't know why it is doing that. So sorry if that's distracting. But um, one of the things that most CPAs tell us, we work with some CPAs around the country, and they tell us, real estate, when you look at the lease payment and the triple nets and the build out cost and all of the stuff that goes into the real estate, it's usually the second highest fixed expense for a practice after payroll. And so you can save, you might be able to cut back a little bit on payroll, but most of the time, if you're paying under market, your staff's just going to go across the street to a competitor. And so you can only cut so much from that line item, but real estate is typically got a number of areas that you can work on, negotiating concessions and driving that lease rate down or the annual escalations down. But even beyond just rate and term, you've got to look at, okay, when I sign this lease, what am I liable for? If the $15,000 HVAC unit goes out in the dead heat of summer, is that on me or is that on the landlord? And so all of these things play into making sure that we try to tip the scales in the favor of our client and make sure that we try to limit that liability, because like the last bullet point here says, you typically only have one chance every 5 to 10 years to reset or reduce this expense or that liability. So that's why real estate's a big deal, is because it's usually one of the higher items to take a look at. I thought it might be helpful if we jump in for just a couple minutes and look at some of the areas that our team looks at specifically, and some of the things that I think the typical dentist, whether they're looking at starting up or relocating or expanding, some of the different reports and intel or the data that they should be reviewing and considering. One of these is going to be a competition map. Obviously, you want to look at research and demographics. So don't throw a dart at the wall and then go draw a target around it. You want to be intentional about where you're opening up. And so we try to provide and help our clients see market demographics. Show me population information and income information and growth and development. What does this look like for the next 5 or 10 years? What's the game plan for growth in the next 5 years with this population? Am I going to be pumping 200,000, 300,000 into a build out in an area where it's actually got negative population growth? Or is this an area that over the next 10 years has dramatic increase coming? So in addition to the population that we're looking at, and employment and education and family makeup, if you're a pediatric dentist or an orthodontist or whatever, you're going to want to make sure you're in an area where you've got, starter homes, families, with young kids and things like that. So demographics play a really important role. In addition to demographics, we like to look at, if you look in the bottom left corner there, it's average household income. You can see some of that shading, but this is a map that has competition overlaid on the household income. And we play with these reports. We'll do different layers or different, some of the different data points that we try to put on top of each other, just to see, wait, should we really be looking in this zip code or that zip code or this area or that area, as we try to help a client. Again, just different population density maps or population growth projections over the next 5, 10 years, what that looks like. This again is population density. So if I'm a dentist and I'm looking at a map like this, I'm probably going to want to gravitate towards some of the properties and areas where I see a greater grouping of those black dots. And so looking at demographics is really important. You can do it through a number of different, Dentographics is great, and EOS has a good, Real Score is a great company. There are tons of them out there. We provide some stuff for our clients as well, but there's a number of resources. But no matter how you get them, you just want to make sure that you're looking at some of this as you are trying to determine where I should open up, what I should look like. And if you're an existing practice, and you're trying to figure out, should I relocate? Maybe should I open a satellite office or a second or a third office or fourth or whatever? Then a patient-based heat map can be really helpful. This looks like a static image, but you're able to put the information into the system so that you're able to zoom in and out of these different neighborhoods. How many of my patients live in this zip code or this area or that area? And I'm trying to figure out where I can, if your waiting room is constantly out of space and the parking is a nightmare and whatever, let's look at an area where I'm able to pull some of the people from office A into office B and open up room for growth in both. So patient-based heat maps is a good resource to be able to look at that. And then when we're looking for clients and we are trying to evaluate the opportunities in a market, we always negotiate, and we'll get into it in just a quick second, but we always try to negotiate at least 2, 3, sometimes 4 properties simultaneously. And the reason for that is it drives up the concessions. It kind of builds a posture where we can leverage these properties against each other and get you the best deal possible. That can be a lease comparison worksheet, looks similar to this, where we put side by side 4 different properties and we say, here's the lease rate, but this one has a much higher tenant improvement allowance. This one has only 2 months of free rent though. Whereas this one, the lease rate might be a little bit lower, but it also doesn't come with as much tenant improvement allowance, but it is going to give you 7 months of free rent. So it's hard sometimes to see just one property at a time and tell if I'm getting a good deal or not. I need to be able to put that side by side with some of these other properties. And so something like a purchase versus lease comparison, showing the tax implications and the equity and the principal pay down and what you're able to deduct on a lease and a purchase and what that looks like at the end of the day. It's funny, many times we'll have clients that start the process and they're like, there's no way I can purchase, and that wouldn't make good sense for me. And we go through this process and they're like, wait a second, it actually makes way more sense for me, even though it might be $700 more a month. Once I'm, once I take into account all the different things, obviously that you guys would help with, or that my CPA would help with, financial advisor, my whatever. Once I get to the finish line here at the end of the year, I'm actually ahead by 6,000 plus. I own my building, and I'm building up equity over time. So we like to go through these types of scenarios: lease versus lease, purchase versus purchase, lease versus purchase. But all that to say, this is not like your house where I'm making a decision based on how I'm feeling and do I love this neighborhood and this kitchen is unbelievable. This is a business decision. And so you need to have good demographics, good data and intel, and you need to have comparisons to be able to evaluate what is the most profitable decision for your practice. Don't put your real estate don't put your real estate ahead of your practice. You need to make sure that even if I may not love this property as much as some of the others I looked at, if it makes the most business sense, then that's where I need to go. I need to let the data kind of determine that. And so we try to help our clients look at that. And then one last piece here, and then we'll get into some of the negotiation and lease and all that kind of stuff. But one last piece here that is really good and helpful to look at is most leases are 50, 60, 70 page leases, 10-point font, 12-point font, a lot of legal language, huge clauses that might take 3 or 4 pages of the document. And most of the time it's way over everybody's head except for the attorneys that drafted it. And so what we like to do, if you've got a practice that has 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 locations or more, for our group practice clients, we do lease abstracting services. And this is basically taking a 70-page lease down to 1 page so you can see all the critical information, dollars and cents and deadlines and expiration dates and commencement dates and the annual escalations and anything else that you need to know that you're in charge of, that you're liable for throughout that lease. This is good for you to have, especially our clients that have 15, 20, 30 offices. That can be really daunting to try to keep track of all that information. And so we try to provide this so that you have a 1-pager. and you can put in some of the dates into your calendar, or, you know, at least that you can be able to take a look at and have a game plan or a strategy with your real estate.
Totally. So good.
All right. Water break. So I thought it might be also helpful to walk through what our typical process looks like with a client. So we'd start with, and when we were working with dentist advisor clients, when we get connected up, we start with a simple discovery call. And this is really just to kind of hear how far you've kind of gone through the process already. Do you have demographics done? Have you done any mapping yet? Have you determined where you want to open up, what that looks like? Do you know what's the vision for your practice? Do you know what kind of building you're looking for? You know, if you're a certain type of, are you wanting to be around certain referral sources? You want to be close to, you know, elementary schools, or you want to be close to you know, aging population? Do you need to be, as a part of your business plan, to be in a first and main type location that's in a shopping center, that's more of a retail type center? That's great. Retail is usually the highest lease type that we negotiate. And I love retail. It can provide great access and visibility and great parking, and you get good signage, but you also pay for that. And so we
Yes.
like to walk our clients through the differences of office versus retail versus like a medical office building. And so there's all kinds of different things we try to uncover in that initial discovery call and figure out what the vision for your practice is. Because then once we have that, once we kind of know what you're looking for, how many operatories are you thinking about starting with? Do you have a growth plan? I don't want you to go pump a bunch of money into a space that within 2 years you're out of space, right?
Mhm.
I want to be able to take a look at, you know, what this is going to look like for the next 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. And so then we take that information and we start the search process. And this is, you know, we have a lot of times clients are like, I can just search on LoopNet and go find some properties, and I can go drive around on the weekend, like we mentioned earlier. And that's true. While that's true, that LoopNet is owned by a company called CoStar, and
Mhm.
CoStar is the professional version. It is the version that commercial developers, brokers, landlords, listing agents, and tenant brokers like we are utilize. And so there's a lot more properties, a lot more information there. For instance, if a landlord has a big shopping center and it's full, they're not going to list anything on LoopNet. But if they've been they're sick and tired of one of their tenants who's been a late pay, and they want to get them out of the space, and they've been a nightmare for the neighboring tenants. The landlords had to put up with it for the last 5 years, and they want to get rid of it. They might put a note into CoStar so the other brokers see that, so that they know, hey, this isn't technically an available space. It's an off-market opportunity. But if you have somebody that would be good, then give me a call. And so we go into site selection. We go drive the market. We reach out to all of the top listing agents, developers, brokers. We try to uncover, you know, every opportunity, turn over every stone that we can, so that we're not just looking at one property at a time, but we find a time that we can tour a lunch or a Friday or a after work or whatever. We try to find a 2 hour window where we can go and say, okay, here's the radius you gave me, and I've vetted. There's, you know, it's not like Zillow. Residential is not at all like commercial. So it's not like there's going to be 200 options. There's likely going to be 10, 15, 20 options max in whatever market you're looking at. And so I've taken the search from these 20 down to the top 6 based on parking, signage, zoning, if there's any other exclusivities in there. So your car broker is going to take a look at all that, and then we're going to go tour that client, and we're going to drive around. We're going to go into each one, and we're going to try to spend 15, 20 minutes in looking at window lines and parking and neighboring tenants, and, you know, how is the building maintained, and could I do a more open floor plan here, or is this going to be do I have a lot more pillars that I'm going to have to build around, or, you know, what does that look like? So we try to do a client tour, and the goal of looking at 6 or 7 locations is not that you like 6 or 7 locations. It's that you say, Ken, I really love this one, but I could see possibly this option C and D are also potentials. That's all I want to hear. I just need a few options. Even though I know you love that one, I'm going to force you to give me 2 or 3 other options because I need to negotiate. You might be like, well, that seems like a lot of work. It helps drive the concessions. If we don't have vetted, verified second and third options, then I can't get your option A to really drill down on the rate and drive up the concessions. And so um, that's when we posture. We build that posture through leverage. We negotiate. We go a few rounds of negotiation. It's that time too that we're going to make sure that you have the right team of advisors around you. That you're talking to a dental attorney, not and a real estate attorney, not cousin Eddie who practices family law up in Seattle and you're in Florida. No, you need to have somebody that knows Florida real estate law, like that reads leases all day, every day. And so we're going to make sure you've got your insurance and your attorney and your equipment and your supplier and your marketing plan in place. You're going to have to obviously potentially go through credentialing if you haven't yet. You're going to have to go through a number of different aspects. Obviously, there's a lot that goes along with the financing and being able to make those determinations and all that kind of stuff. So you might come to the table and have all those, and that's great. We just want to make sure that your team of advisors, whoever that circle is, knows that where we're at in the process so they can start doing their piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
And then we go from there through the negotiations, we go into the lease review. And so this is going to be in conjunction with your dental real estate attorney. And again, sometimes clients are like, well, I thought that's what you did. Don't you do the lease review and all that? And we negotiate the dollars and cents and the terms and the concessions and the locations and all of that kind of stuff. But we are not attorneys. We can't practice law. It's a violation of our license. And so we can't give legal advice. We don't draft leases. That's always on the attorney, and the landlord is going to have their attorney drafting the lease. So you don't. I've had some clients that are like, I'm going to save $1,000 or $2,000. I'm going to read my own lease, and I think I can negotiate. I'm like, oh my word,
Yeah.
please, you're going to cost yourself $100,000 by trying to save yourself 1,000 or 2,000. You need a good commercial real estate attorney to review that lease.
Yep.
And then we go from there. If it's a lease review, if it's a lease, obviously we go into the lease review, and the attorneys are going to go back and forth a few times as well. So this whole process, from the time we have the first call to the time you actually open, is easily 10 to 16 months.
Yeah.
Typically after build out and after, by the time you actually open up, because there's just a lot that goes into that. Usually a tour can take a couple weeks to set up, and then the negotiation can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on how long the attorneys take and how much back and forth there is and all that kind of stuff. If you're buying a building, then that process, the due diligence is likely going to be 90 days on a commercial property, might even be longer. So it just depends on your financing and what type of building or land you're buying. And then we also help walk our clients through the closing of that deal as well. So what needs to be done at the closing table or executing that lease and that whole process. So that's kind of the Carr process, and kind of what we walk clients through. And we are working on getting an easy way for you to be able to get connected up with your local market agent. And so this page we'll be able to have for you here in no time. And this is where you can either put in some lease information or this market. This is where I'm thinking about going, and we'll get you connected up with your local Carr agent. But that's kind of the process and some of the information that really we see dentists making the most sense for dentists to be looking at when it comes to their real estate.
Yeah, Ken, go back one page. This is the coolest piece, everybody, is that working with Carr, remember their size. And Dentist Advisors, we have clients also in all 50 states. it matches so well with Carr in us helping you be in touch with a local Carr representative. Um, I mean, on the daily, we're talking about expansion. We're talking about purchasing. We're talking about real estate decisions. As you know, it's a hot topic. Always will be a hot topic, and Carr is our partner because of this. And so, let's take advantage. So that QR code next will also help you get in touch with them. And also, you found this video either on our Facebook page or on dentistadvisors.com, which also has all of Ken's point of contact information. And so you can reach out as well. This has been fantastic, Ken.
I appreciate the time, and that QR code actually goes straight to me. So that'll go to my page. You can call me or shoot me an email. Be happy to get you connected up with the right agent in your market, or if you've just got broad real estate questions, always happy to help any dentist advisor clients that we can. And sometimes it's just, providing some insight, or hey, and during your next renewal, think about this, or consider that, or maybe, and we've actually helped a number of clients as well, where or not clients, but dentists who said, I'm actually working with another broker, or my mom is a broker, my sister is a broker, so I'm working with them, but they don't really know what they're doing. And I
Yeah,
can really
no.
use some insight. We're always happy to help, provide you some direction, some insight. We're in this to help. One of our mottos on our website is helping people who help people. And so you're constantly trying to take care of us. And so anything we can do to help the industry and help providers. We've got all kinds of blogs and podcasts and webinars and glossaries and all kinds of articles, things like that on our website. It's just education, and hopefully it's helpful. And but anything you have personally, you can click that or scan that QR code and it'll go right to me.
Yeah. Ken, very similar to us. We sometimes hear my brother-in-law is managing all of my personal and business finances, and you're like, well, so yeah, so we get it. This is so awesome. Ken, thank you so much. Excited to be working with you and connect you with our clientele. Everybody, this is Ken Jorgensen and Carr. Excited to be doing more work with them in the future and sharing more content.
Thanks so much.